Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to talk about my top 15 books I read in 2023. Most of them are romances. I only have one book/series that is not a romance, but other than that, all of them are romance books. I really have fallen head over heels with romance this year. I was reading it prior to this year, but I don't think I've read as many romance books that I have this year. So I read, as of filming this, which is December 18th, I've read more than 160 books, and these are my top 15 favorites. I also have two honorable mentions. These are all books that I read in 2023. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have been published in 2023. Some of them have, and I will be talking about them in order of favorite. So I'll start with my least favorite and work my way up to my favorite book I read this year. And if you've watched my channel for a while, I'm pretty sure my favorite book is not going to be a surprise. But yeah, I'll start with my two honorable mentions. The first one is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarrow. So I was debating whether or not this was going to end up in my top 15 or not. I know if I made like a top 23 list, this would have definitely been on it, but I really enjoyed this book. Just like a lot of other people this year, I thought this was just a fun, good time. I haven't read romantasy in a while, and this one just scratched every itch that I had. I really loved Zayden, and I also really enjoyed Iron Flame. I know not a lot of people have. But I am a sucker for this series, and it's definitely going to be a series I'm going to be keeping my eye out on, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to read every single book in the series as soon as it's published. I don't think I need to tell you what this is about, but I'll give you a brief overview. This follows Violet Sorrengail, and this is a world where you can go to school for four different things. And she always thought that she was going to be a scribe. So she always thought that she was going to enter in the scribe quadrant until her mom actually forces her to go into the writer's quadrant. And that is the most difficult quadrant. It's the most dangerous quadrant. And she, unlike other people, also has, like, her body is not as strong as others. I believe she has ligament issues. So she feels like that is a death sentence. And then on top of all of that, she meets Zayden, and Zayden hates her mom and hates her family. So she thinks that he's out to kill her. And then something happens that forces them into a forced proximity situation. And like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Is it the best fantasy book ever? No, but that is not why I'm reading these books. This is just a fun time. And yeah, it didn't end up in my top 15, but I did thoroughly enjoy it, and I would be remiss not to mention it because it did shape a lot of people's years in 2023, but also mine. I did an entire vlog for this book and for its sequel, so I'll leave those linked for you. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I can definitely see why it would be on a lot of other people's favorite books of the year. And then my last honorable mention is Final Offer by Lauren Asher. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. So this is the third and final book in her Dreamland Billionaire series, and this is the only book I read in that trilogy. I actually read it for the Goodreads Choice Award video that I did reading the top 10 romances. So I'll leave that linked for you. This trilogy follows three different brothers, and their grandfather, who is like this Walt Disney type character, left them all a task in his will, and if they complete said task, they can get their inheritance. They are all owners of Dreamland, which is basically Disneyland, and they basically have the same amenities as like the whole Disneyland franchise. So they have their own streaming service, they have their own theme parks, and their own princesses. So the third book follows Cal. He's an alcoholic, and he's been struggling with that ever since his hockey career failed because of a severe injury. And this is basically a second chance romance. He used to be with Alana 6 years ago, and they fell in love, and then he had to break her heart because he was still he was afraid that he was going to hurt her because of his alcoholism, and she made him promise that he would never return to Lake Wisteria. But then when he reads his will, his grandfather wants him to sell the house, lakeside house that they have, and he has to spend one last summer there. What he doesn't know, but he quickly finds out once he shows up there, is that the house was not only willed to him, it was also willed to her, and she doesn't want to sell. So now they're at a standstill. They have to live near each other, and they have to figure out what they're going to do about this house. I really loved it, and I was debating because this is one of my favorites I read for the Goodreads Choice video. I believe in my ranking it was pretty high up, but with a little bit of distance, I ended up loving a couple other books more than this one. So because of that, it ended up as an honorable mention and not as one of my favorites, but I did still love it. I fell in love with this book. I fell in love with her writing, and I cannot wait to read anything else Lauren Asher writes. So yeah, I would highly, highly recommend this series. And you can read them out of order. I am usually a completionist. I like to start series in order and finish them in that order. But for the Goodreads Choice Award, obviously I couldn't, you can read this without having read the other ones. Now for my top 15 books. These are my 15 favorites. Like I said, out of 160 books that I read, these are the top 15. I would recommend all of them. Let's get started. The first one is Caught Up by Liz Tom Ford. I actually, when I made this list, I didn't want to put 2 books from the same series on this list, but I figured that makes no sense because this book I really, really did love. And even though I loved another book more, this still had a chokehold on me. This was still one of my favorite books I read this year. And I figured it's just unfair to this book not to put it in here simply because I also read it in the same year I read the other book, because in a different year, this would have definitely been one of my favorites. So I put it here in number 15. So yeah, this is the third book in the Windy City series. You follow Kai and Miller, and this is a single dad nanny romance. Basically, Kai is a baseball player and he's been firing nannies left and right. So one day his coach gets sick of him. He wants to spend the summer with his daughter, so his coach forces Kai to hire his daughter as the nanny. Their first meeting is kind of a disaster, so he is very hesitant. He doesn't trust her to look after his son, but he feels like he owes it to his coach to try at least. So they do, and Miller is this pastry chef, this world-renowned pastry chef, and she has been having a creativity block, so she decides to take the summer off, but she's always planning on going to, I believe, California for her job after the summer. So their romance has a time limit. And yeah, it's basically them on the road and her falling in love with Max and Kai and him and them falling in love with her. This was so good. I really loved it. I actually read it in a vlog where I read my most anticipated new releases. This definitely did not disappoint. I fell in love with Kai. Kai was such a good guy, and Maxie was so cute, and Miller was so hilarious. I found myself laughing out loud a lot while reading this book, and I really loved seeing the cameos of all the other characters that we've come to know and love in this series. And yeah, if you've not read the Windy City series yet, I would highly, highly recommend it because it is one of my favorite series. So far, I gave one book 4 stars and the other 2 5 stars, and yeah, like I said, definitely one of my favorite series, and I cannot wait to see what else Liz Tom Ford is going to do with this series. Number 14 is In the Likely Event by Rebecca Yarrow. So this is one of 3 books that she published this year, and this is the only one that is not a fantasy romance. This is her military romance, actually. This follows 2 people who are basically soulmates. This is told in alternate timelines. The first one is the present in 2021 in Afghanistan, and then the past, you see basically 7 years of their lives through flashbacks. So in Afghanistan, she is a politician, and this is during in August 2021 when the Taliban takes over in Afghanistan. And she is a politician and he's part of this like special ops. And they meet each other for the first time after 3 years in Afghanistan. And he doesn't know why she's there because he only wanted her to be safe. And obviously this time in Afghanistan is anything but safe. And she thought that he's been dead for 3 years. So they have to confront their feelings and they have to confront what happened in the past. And in the past, they actually met on an airplane right before the airplane actually crashes. So he saves her, and then their life basically revolves around chance meetings and them wanting to be together, but them never getting to be together. And then there's something in New York that happened that they both have different views on of what actually happened. And this was so romantic to me. This felt like this hurt me in like the best ways. I fell in love with this book. I fell in love with Nate in this book. This was so believable to me why these two could not be together. They definitely truly felt like soulmates to me. The way Rebecca Yarrow wrote their romance, I just fell in love with them so much. This is my favorite Rebecca Yarrow's book I've ever read. I thought she did such a good job with this book. I believed in their love story. I believed in their HEA. I truly believe that these characters are going to be together forever. It was so heartbreaking because it wasn't like one of them was a bad guy. It's just through circumstances, through their jobs, they could never really be together. And this was just so, so good. If you have found Rebecca Yarrow's through Fourth Wing, I would say definitely check out this contemporary romance by her if you love military romance. Of course, if you don't, then don't pick this one up. Number 13 goes to Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. So once again, a book I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I read The Love Hypothesis around the time it came out, and I enjoyed it, but it was never my favorite I read that year. And then I skipped her second release, and this is the second book I read by Ali Hazelwood, and I fell in love with it. Basically, this follows Elsie, and she's a theoretical physicist, but she doesn't make a lot of money. So what she does on the side is guys can hire her to be their fake girlfriend. And usually it's only one night that she spends with these guys, but she has a favorite client that she has been a fake girlfriend for a while, and she thinks that his brother hates her. And then one day she actually applies for a different position, and who should be the one deciding if they should hire her or not but Jack, the brother of the guy she's been fake dating. He thinks that she's a liar because as part of this fake dating arrangement, she cannot say what her actual job is, so she's always told them that she was a librarian. So he thinks that she's a liar and that she's been playing his brother. And on top of that, he's also an experimental physicist. And these two types of physics have been at odds for a while now because Jack, when he was younger, he wrote this paper basically mocking theoretical physics, and that caused her mentor to lose his job. So they basically have issues with each other. But what she doesn't know is that, of course, he's been pining for her all these months. He was just so jealous of his brother, and she's basically everything that he's ever wanted. And he's also somebody who's very perceptive because he realizes, when nobody ever did, is that she does code switching. Basically, once she talks to somebody, she can tell what they want from her, and she basically becomes that person. And he helps her become who she really is with him, and they fall in love. And it was so good. I truly fell in love with Jack in this book. I thought he was such a great main male character. I thought he was such a great character in general. And Elsie was a realistic character. She had issues, but I felt like they were pretty realistic. And their romance was like everything I want. Like the way it was described, the way it was like weekends and them spending time together in his home. Like it was just simple but beautiful in my opinion. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And yeah, definitely a favorite of the year. Number 12 goes to Witches Get Stitches by Juliette Cross. So this is the third book in her Stay Spell series, and this is my favorite in the series. I actually read this at the very beginning of the year and I have not stopped thinking about it. Basically, the Stay Spell series follows 6 different sisters, and they're all witches, and each of their romance, and 2 of them fall in love with werewolves, 2 of them fall in love with vampires, and 2 of them fall in love with Grimms. And this is a werewolf witch pairing, which werewolves are my favorite paranormal creature. So anytime there's a werewolf involved, I'm there cheering them on. And yeah, I definitely preferred this over the other werewolf love story in this series. Basically, this is about Violet and Nico, and 2 years ago they had this hot, steamy night together, and then she left, and he knows that she's actually his mate. And then they actually meet each other again when his cousin fell in love with her sister. So that they have the first book in the series. So now they're obviously in forced proximity because they are forced to be around each other because their family are together. She has been keeping him at a distance because she's also a seer that disaster would ensue if they actually got together. They just become friends, even though he does know that she's his fated mate. And then they actually start this tattoo shop together, and they're pretty good friends. And finally she realizes, you know what, I do love him and I do want to be with him. This is so good. This is so good. I fell in love with these two. I thought they were such a good pair, and Nico was just so sexy, and Violet was also sexy. I just thought they were fire together, and I actually have been anticipating their book ever since the second one. So when they finally got together, I was just over the moon, and I have not stopped thinking about them, and I actually cannot wait to reread this one. But yeah, this is actually a very, very good series, but this one is definitely my favorite, and I loved it. Number 11 is Untouchable by Sam Mariano. This is a polarizing one because this actually starts with the hero assaulting the heroine. A hero, I don't know if I could call him a hero, in like the first couple of chapters. Basically, you follow, what's her name? Zoe and Carter. And Zoe, another football player in this small town, assaulted her, and she turned him in. And because of that, she basically became the town pariah. The whole town turned on her. And then now, the guy she accused of assaulting her, plus Carter, plus another football player, actually corner her in a classroom, and Carter basically gives her 2 choices. Either he can face fuck her, or he can actually fuck her, and since she's a virgin, she chooses option number 1. And yeah, that is obviously very traumatic for her. And she calls in sick the next day because obviously she's traumatized. And I could definitely see why she would actually feel sick. But then Carter becomes kind of obsessed with her. So he decides to come to her house bringing soup, charming her mom. And she's horrified. She's like, you know, what the fuck are you doing here? But then he becomes, like I said, he's obsessed with her. So he like starts stalking her, being around her, coming to her job, stuff like that. And until one day, like, she also becomes fascinated by him and they start a relationship. It sounds like a toxic mess. And I wouldn't condone this in real life, but this book was so interesting to me. Like I read this, I believe in April of this year, and I have not stopped thinking about Carter. The way Sam wrote him, like that is just to me an amazing author. I laid it all out for you. This is not a good guy, yet by the end of it, or like throughout the whole book, you're just fascinated by him. You just want to get inside his brain, and this is sold in single point of view, so you only get Zoe's point of view, and she's also fascinated by him. And yeah, at the end of the day, I was honestly rooting for them, even though, like I said, he's not a good guy and he never claims to be a good guy. Sam Mariano has definitely, just because of this book, has become one of my favorite authors. I cannot wait to read anything else this woman writes, because the way she wrote, this is a masterpiece in my opinion. Definitely one of my favorites. Like I said, I could not stop thinking about it, and I cannot wait to reread this one, knowing what I know now. Out of all of them, this one is the one I would caution you most with. If you're uncomfortable with non-con or dub-con, definitely don't read this one. But if you're okay with those things in books, then definitely check this one out, because I don't think you're gonna be disappointed. Now for my top 10. Number 10 is The Frat Boy by Nikki Sloan. So this is actually my first Nikki Sloan, and I knew that I was gonna love her as an author because her anyway, the premise of her books have been intriguing to me. Like, I really wanted to read The Rivalry, I really wanted to read Sorted. Her American Dynasty thing books also really intrigued me, but I figured let's start with The Frat Boy, because I've been hearing so many good things about it when it came out, which was in 2022. And once again, I started with the fourth book and not with the first book. And that was a good decision, because I actually didn't really love the first book, but this one I fell in love with. And you can definitely read these out of order. Basically, you follow Colin and Madison, I think. Yeah, Madison. And she's in a sorority and he's in a fraternity. And every year, the sororities and fraternities have this competition. And she ends up accusing his frat of cheating. So they get into this giant mud fight and they end up getting kicked out of their respective fraternity and sorority, and now they need a place to live. And each of them separately decides to answer this ad of making adult films in exchange for a place to live, basically. And basically the arrangement is you have to make one movie a month to live there, and any other movies you make, the money from that just goes into your pocket. So they both answer this ad, not knowing the other one also answered it. And when they show up at audition, they realize that the other one also answered, and now they actually have to have sex with each other in front of everybody when they really hate each other. They end up being hired, so they both live in that same house. So it's also a roommate situation, and they have to like film together too. They actually have amazing sexual chemistry, and they obviously end up falling in love. This was so good. I truly believed in their love story. I was so entertained with this book. I fell in love with Colin. I thought he was such a great guy. And this was just so hot to me, because obviously they are filming adult movies, so it's not just them together, it's them in scenes with other people and them watching each other with other people. This was so extremely hot. Like, I was just blushing throughout this entire book. Nikki Sloan knows how to write smut, and she definitely did it perfectly here. But other than the smut scenes, I thought she did an amazing job with their romance as well. Like, I truly believed in their HEA. I truly believed that they were gonna end up together, even through all these obstacles. And I just really loved it. I thought it was such a good book. I flew through it. And once again, I could not stop thinking about this book. It was so good. I cannot wait to read more by Nikki Sloan in 2024. Another fraternity type story that I really loved is in number 9, and it's Top Secret by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. This was actually my first book by both these authors. I actually ended up reading more by Elle Kennedy this year, which I'll get to. This one is actually the first time where I read a book and then reread it a couple months later. I never do that. With this one, I just was so in love with this book that I did that. Plus, it's really short, so it wasn't that difficult to do. Basically, this book, you follow Keaton and Luke, and they are in the same fraternity, and they actually share a floor. So the third floor, there's only 2 rooms. Like, one of them has one and the other one has the other. And they basically don't like each other. Keaton plays his music really loud when Luke has to sleep because he works late hours. And they just don't like each other. They're very different people. And then one day, Keaton's girlfriend wants to have a threesome, so with another man. So Keaton goes on this kink app and he starts chatting with a guy. And they really hit it off. Keaton is exploring his sexuality. And then one day, they actually decide to meet to have this threesome. And then they finally see who they've been talking to, and it's each other. And they're horrified, so they run off. And then obviously they have to confront what happened because they're still roommates. And then Keaton's girlfriend actually breaks up with him, and then they actually start exploring their relationship. Luke has always known that he was bisexual, and Keaton discovers that he might not be straight, that he might actually be gay. And this was so hot to me. Luke is a stripper, and there was this scene of him stripping and Keaton watching, and it was so good. And I just really love them. They are opposites attract very much, because Keaton is very much a golden retriever hero, and Luke is just a tortured hero. His family sucks. They constantly keep asking him for money, and they constantly ruin his life. He just wants to go to college, get his degree, and move away from this town and until he meets Keaton. And Keaton is everything that Luke honestly wants to be. He's rich. His family is rich. He doesn't really have any problems, or so Luke thinks. And this was so good. I really loved it. I actually have not read him yet. That is definitely high up on my list to read in 2024, but this one was so good and I flew through it. Number 8 is another one I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I do have to say, there were some gems in that list for me, and it's Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is the second book in her Maple Hill series. You follow Russ and Aurora, and Russ is a hockey player, and they actually meet at this hockey party, and they have this one-night stand, and then Aurora leaves before Russ comes back from the bathroom. Then they actually meet each other at this summer camp. The summer camp has a no fraternization policy, so they have to work together even though they're falling for each other. And this was so good. Russ is like the sweetest boy ever. Like, he's such a good boy. I loved him. He was so sweet. He was just so caring. I fell in love with him. And Aurora was so funny, so caring too. And they both actually have issues with their dads. His father is a gambling addict and constantly asks him for money. And if he doesn't give him money, he cusses him out. And then Aurora's father has this new family, and he never really gives her the time of day, and basically she acts out. She knows that if she acts out, she'll finally does get the attention of her dad. And they both decide this summer that they're gonna turn a new leaf. She decides that she doesn't want to live this destructive way anymore, and he decides to not give his father any attention anymore. Even though they did have this one night stand, it ends up being a slow burn romance, and I really, really loved it. I fell in love with this book. Actually, I have not read the first book yet, but I'm very much looking forward to reading that one. This one was so good. I really loved it. Number 7 is The Bully by Sophie Lark. This is the third book in her Kingmaker series, and I do have to say, and I'm sorry, but you cannot read this book as a standalone. In fact, you have to read the entire Brutal Birthright series. Preferably read the first 2 books in her Underworld series, and then you have to read the first 2 books in the Kingmaker series before getting to this one. If you don't want to do all that, then definitely read the first 2 books in the Kingmaker series. But basically, this is a Draymini love story, which, for those of you who don't know, I love Draymini. I've loved Draymini ever since I was like 13 or 14. I've been reading Draymini fan fiction. I think they are the best couple that never was. Basically, you follow Dean and Kat, and in the second book, Dean has been like the villain in the first 2 books, and in the second book he saw Kat doing something, and now he has leverage over her, and in this book he decides to make her his sex slave so that he doesn't tell anybody her secret. And in starts a month of her basically doing everything that he wants, them trying different sexual things, and this was so hot to me. But also, other than like the spicy scenes, I truly believed in their love story. I thought, like I said, I am a sucker for the Draymini trope. I'm a sucker for the villain turned good guy trope. I mean, he'll never be a good guy, but I've been intrigued by Dean ever since the first book, and this just was executed so well. I truly believed in their HEA. I truly believed that they would fall in love. And I really love the fact that they explored their relationship and actually got closer through sex. I always love that in books, that the sex is there not just to be a smutty good time, but also serves a purpose, and especially serves a purpose in their relationship. And this book did that perfectly. I love the groveling scenes in here too. It was just so good. And I really love the setting of this Kingmakers series, and I really loved especially the third and fourth book, but out of those two, the third one was definitely my favorite. And yeah, I would highly recommend it. So I told you guys you have to read all the other books, but that is definitely not a hardship because the Brutal Birthright series is an amazing series in my opinion, and the first two books in this series were also really good. And this is just like the icing on the cake, a very, very delicious icing on the cake. Okay, now for my number 6. I don't know if you can even see that. No, I'm gonna put a picture here. It's Married by Morning by Lisa Kleypas. So this year I actually read the entire Hathaway series by her, and I fell in love with each and every book. I gave all of them 5 stars. It's definitely a favorite series ever for me, but out of all of them, the fourth one, Married by Morning, was my favorite. Basically, the Hathaways, you follow the 5 Hathaway siblings and each of their romances, and actually this fourth book has been teased ever since the second book. So I've been waiting patiently for 2 books to finally get this book, and this one did not disappoint at all. Basically, this story you follow Leo and Kate and Kat. Leo is the Viscount, and he is basically her boss, and she's a ladies' companion. Basically, her job is to get his 2 younger sisters married off. She thinks that he's a rake. He's just like the type of privileged man that she hates, and he thinks that she is prim and proper and thinks that she's no fun. And like I said, their relationship has been building ever since the second book, because what Lisa Kleypas does is not only gives us point of views of the main couple in a book, sometimes she'll add a different point of view. So this is the ultimate hate to love romance, and once they finally do get together, sparks fly. Like, it's electric between them, and I really, really loved them. I thought they were so good together. I really loved Leo. I have been, even though in the first book he was a hot mess and he did some things that he should not be proud of. Oh my god. I just saw so, anyway, that he should not be proud of. I always was intrigued by him. Like, I just knew that all of that was because of all the hurt that he's been through. I feel like Kat is like the perfect woman for him because she's his opposite. She's not afraid to tell him when he's wrong. She's not afraid to tell him off, which is exactly what he needs. And this was just so good. I really loved it. And I honestly, you could not go wrong with any books in the series. I do have to say, you can read Married by Morning without having read the other ones, but if you want to have the biggest impact, I would say just read the series in order. And if you don't want to do that, then definitely read at least the second and third book before reading Married by Morning, because that is going to give you the full love story of them. Mine Till Midnight is one of my favorites as well. Like, I loved every single book in this series, but this one just ekes it out a little bit. It's definitely my favorite in the series. Now for my top 5, and my top 5 is actually gonna start with my only not romance, but I could not include this. I really fell in love with this manga series this year. This was so good to me, and it's, let me see if I can show you all of them. It is the Spy Family series. I really love this series. So I read all 10 volumes this year, and I'll never look back. This to me is like the slowest of burns, because I do believe that Lloyd and Yor are gonna get together. Basically, this is, you follow a spy named Lloyd, and he is sent to a different country on a mission. He needs to get close to this like political figure in the other country, and in order to do that, he needs to create this family because he wants to enroll his fake child into the same prestigious academy that the politician's son is in. So he gets himself a fake wife and a fake child, but what he doesn't know is that his wife is an assassin and his child is a mind reader. The only one who knows what's actually going on is his child, is the mind reader. And this is just so good, to so heartwarming. It is like, especially Anya, the child, she's so adorable. I love how, even though she's a mind reader, like the dumb thing she does is hilarious to me. Yor is so funny to me. This is just hilarious. And this is such a heartwarming but also funny story. And yeah, I really fell in love with this manga series. I'm definitely gonna be reading this until its final volume, which hopefully it will never have a final volume. It is so good. I can definitely see myself rereading this over and over and over again. I think this is an excellent series. And I would say I haven't read a whole lot of manga in my life. I would say definitely if you're looking for a manga to start, I would definitely start with this one because it's very easy to get into because it's a contemporary, it's just a spy story. So yeah, I just love it. I really, really love it. And yeah, I would highly recommend it. And if you love romance, I would say definitely read this because in my heart, Yor and Lloyd belong together. I love how Anya's friend, who's a little bit older than her, she also loves romance, and she's constantly like has a crush on Lloyd, and she thinks that Anya and the child of this politician also could be great together romantically. It's just fun, but also like it is very heartwarming, and it also deals with some more difficult topics as well. So yeah, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this one. And now for my top 4 romances. Number 4 is The Deal by Elle Kennedy. So I told you Elle Kennedy was going to show up again in this list, and here she is. So this is the first book in her off-campus series, and this is the first time I've ever read the off-campus series. I actually read it for a vlog reading sports romances, so I'll leave that linked for you. This is the type of book that when I finished it, I thought I really loved it. But after time has passed a little bit, it definitely became my favorite. Sometimes that happens. Either I give a book a 5 stars and after a couple of days I realize, no, it was actually a 4. But sometimes it happens the other way around where I usually give it 5 stars. So I do know that I loved it. But at that point, it's not a favorite. But after a couple days or a couple weeks, I realized, no, you know what? I cannot stop thinking about these characters. I cannot stop thinking about this book. It's definitely a favorite. And that is exactly what happened in The Deal. Basically, you follow Hannah and Garrett, and Hannah has been having a crush on this football player at school, and he hasn't really given her the time of day. And Garrett is this popular hockey player at this college, and he needs his grade to be, like his average to be at a certain point to continue playing. And now during this philosophy class, he got a really bad grade, and the only one that did get a good grade was actually Hannah. So he wants her to tutor him, and she has no interest in that. So he is very persistent though. He keeps asking, and then one day he realizes, oh, she has a crush on this football player, and then he proposes a deal where she'll tutor him, and in turn he'll fake date her because his theory is once the football player sees her with the popular hockey player, he's going to be interested in her. So they end up doing that. She ends up tutoring him, and while tutoring, they actually become really good friends. And then one day she actually tells him that she has been issues in the bedroom because when she was 15, she was actually raped at a party, and ever since then, she's not been able to let herself go enough to orgasm with another man. So he sets out to help her with that. So he does some research and tries to help her with that problem. And Garrett is just like the perfect guy, even though like he's like a 20-year-old dumb college guy in this book. Like he's just so perfect to me. He was so sweet. I fell in love with him. I think he's just the perfect guy. And this is, as you can see by her problems, this does deal with some difficult topics as well, because Garrett actually has a father who's very abusive to him. So both of them actually deal with heavy shit, but it's also funny, it's heartwarming. I fell in love with this book. So far I've only read the first 2, and this is definitely my favorite, but like it's a favorite book of the year, a favorite book of all time, and I really enjoyed it. I think if you just like me have waited years and years and years to start the off-campus series, I would highly recommend it because it does hold up. This was published in 2015. I fell in love with it even though I read it in 2023. If you're one of the few people who have not read this book yet, please do yourself a favor and read it because you're not going to be disappointed. I just actually realized 3 of the top 4 are actually sports romances. That is funny. I did not realize it because number 3 is Powerless by Elsie Silver. So in 2023, I actually started reading the Chestnut Spring series by her, and this is 100% my favorite. I fell in love with this book. I know a lot of people's favorites is Heartless, and I can definitely see why, but ultimately this was just my favorite. But I did love every book of the Chestnut Spring series. I gave all of them 5 stars, but out of all of them, this one was my favorite. Basically, you follow Jasper and Sloane, and Jasper, when he was a teenager, something horrible happened, and his parents just ended up being like the worst type of parents. So one day his best friend, Bo, basically takes him to his house, and the Eatons adopt him. And I believe it happens when he's 15. And the Eatons also have a cousin named Sloane. And when she's 10, so there's a 5-year age gap, she goes to her cousin's house every summer and she realizes there's this new boy there. And ever since the first time she saw him, she has been loving him from a distance. So this is that very much a pining heroine trope, which I love those. I know not a lot of people do, but I do because I really relate to those type of heroines. So she's been crushing on him ever since, and everybody knows, including Jasper. And when she's a teenager, nothing can happen between them because 5 years is not a lot for an age gap, but it is a lot when she's like 15 and he's 20, or she's like 17 and he's 23. So when she's a little bit older, she once again tries with him and he rejects her. So he's been rejecting her a couple times throughout her life. So one day she just decides that she needs to move on. So she gets engaged to somebody else, but on her wedding day, she finds out that her fiance has been cheating on her. So she runs away with Jasper, and throughout that time, they finally confront their feelings because it turns out that, yes, when she was a teenager, he didn't reciprocate, but when she got a little bit older, he did have feelings for her, and there were reasons why he had to reject her. This was so good. Jasper is such a sexy hero, and like I said, I did relate to the main character, with the main female character, which is why this probably is a favorite for me. But the smutty scenes in here were so hot. Like, I still find myself thinking about some of those scenes. The crawl to me scene, the shower scene, like there are some top tier smutty scenes in this book. And I just really love Jasper. I love how he's so quiet and he loves quietly too. But sometimes he's just like so funny too. Like, I love that. Like, you saw that a little bit in like the first and second book where he would be so silent, but then he would also egg Harvey on a lot. And I really love the scenes between him and Harvey in here because obviously Harvey is not his biological father, but he is in every way that matters. I really, really love this book. This is also, even though he's a famous hockey player, this is also like different social classes because she's like this rich girl. She's a ballerina too. Honestly, I would say if you've not read the Chestnut Spring series, what are you doing with your life? Please start them because I am convinced that everybody will love at least one book in that series. And I do know, it's funny to me because everybody else has a different favorite. I know Heartless is a very popular one, Powerless 2, and Reckless. I believe out of all of them, those three I know have a lot of fans, so this one is my favorite, but I have loved every single one of the Chestnut Springs books. Now for my top two. Oh, this was very hard for me. And at the end of the day, I decided to go with this because one of them I've been loving ever since I read it in August, whereas this one is a very recent one. And also, one of them is a little bit more balanced as far as my emotions are concerned. So my number two favorite is actually Manacled by Senlin Yu. Oh my god, just like thinking about it makes me want to cry. This is actually a fan fiction. I actually had it bound. What can I say about this book? Basically, this is a Harry Potter fan fiction. Dramione, because like I said, I just love Dramione. This book has been so popular and it's basically the ultimate Dramione story. This takes place after the events of the fifth book, and this is an alternate universe. So basically, in the fifth year, Draco kills Dumbledore. Basically, Voldemort has won in this story. Pretty much everybody in the Resistance have died, and now this is basically a mix between Harry Potter and The Handmaid's Tale, because now Voldemort, because pureblood wizarding families have barely been having children, he decides to use Muggleborns as like basically handmaidens for like these pureblood men to have babies with them. Hermione has been given to Draco, and yeah, so this deals with rape, and it's a very bleak world. Like, it is so depressing, and this is actually told in 3 parts. So the first one is the present, and then part 2 is actually all flashbacks, and then the third part goes back to the present, and you find out that there's something between Draco and Hermione. This is a romance at the end of the day. It does have an HEA, but even their HEA was very sad. I really fell in love with this book. I do have to say, it did take me a very long time to read it, because especially the first part is just full of depressing things and not a lot of happiness, which made it very hard for me to read. And I was reading other books in between them. But ever since I started the flashbacks, I pretty much flew through this book. But yeah, I do have to say, like, the overwhelming emotion I felt with this book was sadness, because even like their sex scenes were sad. I'm not talking about the rape. I'm talking about when they actually have consensual sex. Even those are sad. The flashbacks, even though they have some happy memories, most of that is just sad. And even their epilogue, even though we get 3 epilogues, even though you do know it is an HEA, they end up together, but it's also a lot of sadness and a lot of consequences from the things they've done in the past. This to me is a masterpiece. This is truly like a work of art. Some lines that Senlin Yu wrote were just so beautiful to me. I actually did an entire vlog for this book, which I'll leave linked for you. It's full of spoilers, but I do read out some of my favorite quotes in here. It is so beautiful. Like I said, just thinking about it makes me cry. I do feel like I'm going to be thinking about this book for years upon years. It's definitely going to be a book I'm going to be rereading. It is a shame that Senlin Yu cannot make any money out of this book. And I understand why, because it's so clearly a Harry Potter inspired book and a Handmaid's Tale inspired book, but this is just a masterpiece in my opinion. This was so heartbreakingly beautiful, and yeah, she just did such a great job of convincing me that these two are truly soulmates. And you can read this for free on AO3, which I'll leave that linked for you. Do yourself a favor and read this book. And you don't necessarily have to read Harry Potter. I do have to say, if you know and love Harry Potter, it's going to be that much more heartbreaking to see all the characters that have died. But you can definitely read this without having read Harry Potter, and you could definitely get the gist, because at the end of the day, it's an enemies to lovers romance. And yeah, I don't have any words for this book. It is just beautiful, and I am very happy that I read it, even though reading it definitely made me anything but happy. Like, it was just sadness on top of sadness on top of sadness. And now my favorite book I read in 2023. I've been saying this was going to be my favorite, or one of my favorites, for months now, and it's The Right Move by Liz Sumford. You guys knew that this was going to be on here because I talked about Caught Up. I talked about there's going to be another one in here. And plus, I also read this for my sports romance vlog, and I think I told you guys in that vlog that this was going to be one of my favorites. I fell in love with this book. This basically follows Ryan and Indy, and Ryan is a twin brother of the heroine from the first book, and Indy is the best friend of that heroine. Indy, in the last book, found out that her boyfriend of years has been cheating on her, so she moves out of that place, and now she needs a place to live. And since Stevie moved out of her brother's apartment in the last book, she asks her brother to take Indy in, and Ryan really doesn't want to because he's very set on his privacy. He's a famous, world famous basketball player, and he doesn't have a lot of privacy, and the only place where he can be himself and be away from the spotlight is in his own home. And it was fine when it was his sister, because it's his twin sister. She knows him better than anyone. But this basically stranger who he had some weird interactions with in the first book, he's not too keen on that. So he agrees because he does love his sister, but he makes the rent very cheap so that she can move out as soon as possible. And Indy just blasts into his life, bringing color and fun, basically. So this is a roommate romance and also fake dating, because he's a new captain of his basketball team, and his general manager doesn't really like him. And his general manager tells him that the reason why he's not a good captain is because he's all about the sport and doesn't have any personal life. So he tells him that he actually has a girlfriend. So he asks Indy to be his fake girlfriend. So obviously shenanigans ensue. What I really loved about this book was Ryan. Ryan is the perfect man, in my opinion. The way, like, I love how Liz Sumford wrote his quiet love. Like, the way he did all these things for Indy without it being too flashy, without him screaming from the rooftops how much he loves her. He shows her in little but significant ways how much he loves her. And even before they're actually in love, he does all those things, because that is what he does when he cares about somebody. And Indy was just an amazing heroine. I really think a lot of us really relate to her. I love the fact that she's not like other girls tropes. Like, she basically tells him, I am like every girl. But the way that she loves him was beautiful. And they both deal with some pretty heavy things in their past, so they have a lot to overcome. But I just loved watching these two fall in love. I have loved them ever since I first read about them. But throughout the months, I have not stopped thinking about it. And that is ultimately why this one won over this one. First reason is because I read this one first, and I have just had months to think about how this is my favorite. Plus, this just is way more balanced as far as like emotions are concerned. Because yes, there were parts in here that did make me sad, but there were funny moments in here too, heartwarming moments, sweet moments. So this made me happy first and foremost, which is what I really love, like what I look for in a favorite of the year. I have talked a lot about The Right Move. A lot of people have, but to me, it is for a good reason. I really love this book, and yeah, I would highly, highly recommend it. So those were my top 15 books of 2023. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were. And I also really would love to know what were your favorite books that you read this year. Definitely like give me your top 3. I would really love that. And if you're also a YouTuber and you've done this video, definitely let me know so I can watch yours as well. I really love watching these at the end of the year. They always make me so happy. So yeah, leave all your thoughts down below. And so this is all the books that I really loved. I actually also did a video of books that I hated, which I'll leave linked for you. You'll actually see some authors pop up in that list as well. That just shows you that an author can write like your favorite book, but also sometimes they miss the mark for you. Yeah, definitely leave all your thoughts down below, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.